Call it to order. First thing is budget review. We're gonna go over the 18-19 budget review as it's been updated with more information than we had last week.
Yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about the operating side and introduce the capital, start the CIP discussion on the budget, so. Then we'll complete it, then the next meeting, and Wes will go over the schedule for the next meeting. So, Wes, take her away.
And the capital is preliminary now, so they're still working on getting the capital numbers together, so James is gonna talk about that when we get there. But,
I know there's a lot of big numbers in the capital, so I have a lot of questions there, James.
yeah, it's a lot of pages.
Something about an outfall, we're gonna do it all in 1 year, this year.
Yeah, you can talk to that guy. Okay, so, welcome back, budget party page. Okay, I won't say the joke.
Maybe we have balloons going off, you know.
I know, it kinda does look like with the hands holding up the budget numbers.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. Okay, so today we're gonna go over, I'll just kinda get into the budget calendar and talk about where we're going. And we're gonna do I've got some different terms here, water sales scenarios, water sales estimates. For that, I know that we had, so we didn't make any changes to the operating budget, but I know Director Snell had asked if we're gonna stay within our rate increases. So we decided to do some water projections, water sales projections, and show those to you today. Then we're gonna go over the capital budget requests. We'll talk about the vehicles and equipment. Then we'll go into the budget calendar, next steps, as far as the next meeting. And finally, we'll talk about our audit firm recommendations, give you an update on that, and get your advice. So, I won't spend too much time on this because we've already done it twice. But in February, we started the budget process. We had the meeting on the 26th, went over the budget calendar and the actual versus budget for the last 5 years. In March, we started compiling the operating budget. We met on the 22nd to go over the operating budget request with Ed, and then we went over the preliminary salary and benefit estimates. Now we're in April, and we've incorporated the operating budget. We're starting to revise and refine the budget. And today we're going to be talking about, instead of reviewing the operating budget, we'll do the water sales estimates, and then we'll go into the capital budget requests. So, Mike is actually going to start with our water sales estimates.
Okay, so okay, so we have a couple unknowns. We have the water sales, we also have water purchases, and I just want to real quick go over the purchases, is that we don't have a lot of information yet from the Water Authority. I think on April 17th we get more refined numbers on what our costs will be. So the cost will change per unit of acre foot. I put in preliminary numbers here just to throw something in there, and they're really basically this year's numbers, and I added 4.5%. Whether it's going to be 4.5%, I don't know. It could be 6, it could be 2, but when we get those numbers in, we'll put them in here and it'll flow through the spreadsheet and get us a number. So right now,
Is there a date certain they have to have that to all of their members?
yeah, I'm not sure when the date is. I'm hoping
They
the
usually
17th.
try to do it by the meeting in April or May.
Yeah, we're gonna have probably 2 meetings with them in April, one April 17th and probably one a week within that date, and hopefully they'll shore up those numbers because obviously it affects all the member agencies.
Aren't we locked in on the DSAL for like 2% a year? Or something
We
like
are,
that?
and it's actually, there's like 5 different line items, if you want to call it that, and each one is indexed by a different number. Some are 2%, some are CPI, some are maybe ENR, some are cost of SDG&E. So it averages around, it's been anywhere from 2.4 to 3.6 has been the increase. I put 4 because I do things very conservatively, so I'm putting the highest that I think it will be.
Okay.
And I have a feeling these numbers will be lower, but I don't want to put them low and then come back and say, hey, it's going to be $1 million higher. So right
2.4, 3.6 per month?
for the year, sorry.
Because you've only had one of the year to do this.
We've had 3, this is really the 3rd year. So we've had a 2.4 increase the first year and a 3.65% increase last year. So I think I actually might have even put in, no, yeah, I put in 4.5 at 4 or 4.5 I believe. So again, once we know the numbers, it'll drive all of the factors in here and come up with a number. So right now we're preliminary basing it on 32.7 million for water sales, for water purchases. I'm sorry.
And that should be considerably high.
Hopefully, yes. So real quick, what I wanted to do is just kind of give you a sense of comfort in knowing where these numbers come from. So I'm not going to go too much in detail, but I talked about my famous 250,000 lines of data. So here it is right here, 256,288 lines of data. So I pull every single customer, every single month, and I have all the customers' data for all the months. So I can look at what their usage history has been. Then I also go back 3, 4, 5 years and kind of see where we've been. I don't take just 1 year statically. I look at kind of what's happening now with the snowpack. Are we going to go into another drought, another recession, things like that, and then plug those in. So when we get to the revenue, all those 256,000 lines of data come up to 10 lines of data for you, or however many this is. So what I did is then, and I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see it. So from all that data, is I can tell you from by meter size, because that's how we bill, how much water we're going to be using, how much water we're going to be selling, excuse me, and I can kind of project by usage history to how much is going to be used in all these different tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So the one thing that we've got to kind of keep in the back of our mind is if there's a 5% less usage, it does not necessarily mean 5% less in revenue, because most of that usage is going to happen in tier 3. So I kind of just wanted to show you these numbers right here. 17.2% of our usage, our sales, are in tier 3. But that 17.2% in sales make up 31% of our revenue.
Wow.
So I kind of wanted to keep that in mind, that if we do go through a drought and we do have mandatory cutbacks, most of that cutback is going to be in the tier 3 usage.
Makes sense.
So just kind of, so what we have preliminary is about from this 14,000, almost 15,000 acre feet in sales is going to equate to about $30.8 million in revenue. That's commodity. We have our estimated ready to serve of 13.1 million for a total of 44 million. And then what I did on this sheet, just to bring it forward, I'm going to make it one smaller so we can see both columns, is I brought in the purchases that was on the other sheet that we showed, and just showed a delta. So this is commodity sales only. This is purchases including fixed costs and the delta. So if you really want to compare total sales to total cost, it'd be those two numbers. But we also compare it by commodity. So then Wes was mentioning, what we did a sensitivity analysis. So he wanted to know, okay, what happens if there's a 5% less in sales? So I built this spreadsheet so we can do a sensitivity analysis. I just wanted to kind of show you. So if I put in the 5%, it's going to take about 20 seconds for it to process, because it's gone through all the iterations. So bear with this. Oh, actually, there it is. So the water sales, okay, even though the sales went down 5%, the revenue actually went down 6.3%. So I was just trying to show you that most of it's going to be in the tier 3 cutbacks, and I even have by summary how much the revenue cutback is per tier. So you can see it right there in the revenue cutback. So, and then the purchases it flows through to the purchases too, so the purchases would go down a little bit too. So I think that's kind of what I wanted to present. I didn't want to go into too much detail, but I wanted to give you a sense of, feeling that you know where the numbers are coming from and how it all drives that. So if we don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and Wes will go ahead and do the scenario and
We
plug
should
these
get bumper
numbers in.
stickers. We love water hogs.
Kind of. I mean, it's kind of like a,
That's where the money's at.
you're telling everyone to conserve, but we make our money on the tier 3.
Right.
When I was teaching at Palmer, I always used to say we're the worst salespeople on the planet.
Yeah.
Don't buy our
That's true.
stuff.
Yeah.
We
We
make
really
more
are.
money.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, real quick, go back to the 0%.
Oh, sure.
So the sales volume that you predicted was 14,848. Where did you get that number from?
That is basically almost saying that we're going to stay flat from this current year.
Okay, that's about what we had.
It's about what we were
Okay.
going to have projecting this year.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, a lot of my numbers are conservative, so the revenue numbers may actually go up a little bit, but that's the way I project. Is very conservative to start out with, and then as we get more refined, we'll cut that a little bit.
This was kind of a worst case scenario, so you could see that our rate increases, where they would lead us.
So you want to go back to the
Yeah, sure.
to this?
Sure.
Back to you.
That was great. Very informative. Thank you, man.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank
Okay, so those are the using the numbers that Mike just showed you, I plugged them into the operating budget. So here's the $30.8 million plugged into water sales up there for the budget, and I didn't change any of these are all the numbers you saw at the last meeting. So given those water sales, the ready to serve, and the purchases, we end up with a transfer to reserves of $698,000. So that's with sales being steady and no reduction. So next, given the 5% reduction in demand, we'd have water sales of 28.9 million, same ready to serve, and water purchase actually goes down with the sales. And you've got a negative 146,000. That could be rounding whatever else, so it's only 146,000, it's looking pretty good, given the fact that we're very conservative and this is a 5% reduction in demand.
Quick question. 17-18, you're showing 483 going into reserve. Estimated still because
Coming
it's
out.
not the end of the year,
You're right.
correct? Where is that money slated to go, or when is that decision made, or who makes it?
So as it stands right now with our reserve policy, it goes to replacement reserves. So it'll go to water replacement to fund.
But isn't that 483 a positive number? Does that mean that we took it out of reserves?
No, I mean it goes to
We
reserves.
added 2, so the reserves are actually gonna be bigger at the end of this year.
Oh, I see. So then,
Okay.
so in 18-19, you're budgeting a negative 146?
No, this is with the 5%
Yeah,
cutback.
this is the
Okay,
super
yeah.
conservative number. So worst case scenario with a 5%
I gotcha.
reduction in demand, we'll end up at negative 146, which isn't.
Go back one slide.
Yeah, get out the slide. I thought that was a negative number too.
How much is in reserve right now for that?
So I'll show
For
you
that
that.
to be added to?
Yeah, I'll show you that at the next meeting. We'll go over the full reserves and the projection for the next 5 years.
Okay, and is there a number we try to keep that to?
Yep.
Because that
So-
keeps building. If you're
It's
putting
those
in,
bumpers.
if you're putting in another
Yeah.
500,000,
Yep.
means you don't have 500,000 in there now, you should have.
So we have a floor and a ceiling for our reserves, and we try to stay between the floor and the ceiling.
Right.
And Glenn and I were actually talking about this today. We're going to be looking at our reserve policy in the near future, and that'll be a good time. Maybe I don't know if it's okay to mention, it, we might bring it to the finance committee meeting, and maybe we'll discuss it here where we want to set that target balance.
Because right now, we don't really have a target other than to be between the 2 goalposts. So it'd be nice to know, do you want to be in the middle, near the high end, near the bottom end?
Right, and what's the reason for the goalposts? What do they represent? I
Right.
guess?
If you hit the top, then it goes into rate stabilization. If you hit the
go above
top,
that,
then the remaining goes into rate stabilization. And if you get down too low, then I guess alarms go off and bells and whistles.
Well, what's that, I guess the question is, what's that bottom number predicated on?
At 6 months of reserves,
Yes.
of operating reserves.
Okay, and that's a standard in the industry?
Correct.
Makes sense. And the top end number?
I'm
How'd that
not-
goalpost get there?
I have to look at that to tell you honestly,
10
what the
years.
ceiling is.
It's something.
I think it's
There's
different
like-
for water and
It's
sewer.
a certain number of years of replacement projects coming forward. We take a look and see how much money do we think we need to do replacement projects, because that's the funding source for a lot of them.
It's actually in the budget on the last 2 pages.
Oh,
So
okay.
it shows where the ceiling and floor come from, these 2 numbers here. So I think it's actually, 8 years for sewer and 10 years for water.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is the straight demand with no reduction. So we're showing a $698,000 transfer to reserves for replacement if that were
Okay.
scenario happened.
But we didn't see that the 2 years prior to, 16-17 and 17-18, although my understanding was we were doing something with money to create a leveling effect when the desal came in. I guess we didn't really do that.
You're talking about like a smoothing type thing?
We didn't raise the rates high enough to cover the increased costs of desal. But you'll notice, if you look at the 2 center columns, one's a budgeted 17-18, the other is the projected. When we adopted the 17-18 budget, we thought we were gonna be pulling money from reserves, but we
Right.
actually we were projecting to actually add money to the reserves by the end of the year. And that's probably an indicator of just
Wow.
more water sales.
Well, yeah.
Rebound.
Yeah. People aren't conserving right
God bless them.
Which is
now.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Our governor wants to change that.
Yeah.
But we don't.
Not really.
Okay. So no other questions on that. We'll go into the capital. This is what you got in your packet. This is the comprehensive project list. We like to call it the CIP master. This is actually developed from the system. Staff engineering operations, everybody enters their CIP, their capital project request. And
I'm looking for a CIP master. I don't see
that's
it.
page 34, it's the first one right there. So that's the slide you're looking at. And actually I divided that into two for the slide. I've broken it down into two for the slide so you can read it easier. So the top part is just the existing projects.
Let's wait till, sorry.
So the top part shows these are the carry forward projects, or the existing projects from last year's budget. And the first column shows the previous budget and amendments, so anything that's been changed by the board between now and then and the previous budgets. The second column, and when I say second, I mean like towards the number columns there, it says estimated expended as of June 30, 2018. So what we do for that is we take the March 31st numbers, or around there, and roll it forward to the end of June. So we say, what do we think we're going to spend on each project, by June 30th? So if you take the previous budget less the amount expended, you get the amount that's carried forward into this budget year. And then you have any additional requests, or new requests for the projects for the year. So that actually becomes the project total, which is the farthest right column, and that's your total budget for the next 5 years as far as capital. The circled items are your two largest new requests for the year, and that's the parallel outfall and the City of San Marcos joint projects. Those have requests of 13.7 and 3.2 respectively. Okay, so that's the carry forward projects. This next slide shows, it's just the bottom half of that same page. These are the new project requests for the year. So these didn't exist last year, they're being requested this year.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Going back to number 4, the first one, the Encina parallel land outfall. We've spent $150,000 on that already. And now this year, we're looking at spending $30 million on it?
No, that's, like I said, we're still developing. I'm gonna go over all those CIPs. I'll hit that one specifically during the
Yeah, we're gonna get in a little more, they're gonna come in more detail after I've gone over the summary here for you, so,
Okay.
James will answer all your questions. Okay, so, this is the summary page. The next one is just a new project request. So, this year you can see I highlighted 2 of them because Encina, as you know, we own 22% of Encina. So whatever they budget for capital, we actually budget for 22% of that. So over the next 5 years, and that's actually what the outfall was doing, was 5 years worth, but over the next 5 years, we're gonna have $27.1 million from Encina's, from their capital projects. And then down at the bottom, we have the future projects, the $22.8 million. That actually, those are projects that are not being worked on this fiscal year, but are budgeted for out years. That hasn't changed since last year, still has the same number there. But if you take those 2 out of the new requests, the total new request was $52.3 million. If you take those 2 out, you would get $2.4 million. So there's really only 12 new project requests for $2.4 million.
Oh, okay. Well, then why, then really new request of $2.4 million?
From the district. So, the district requested 2.4, well, the future requests, those were actually there last year, they're budgeted for out years. So we're putting them in there as placeholders, so we budget for them in our reserves, because we want to do that to be conservative. And in Encina, we have to book 22.4% of their capital projects. And it's a large dollar amount, so we really can't.
What are they doing in Encina?
They're replacing their solids area. They're adding these. I mean, they're doing a host of projects.
A whole host.
Biggest thing is they're using solids handling.
A heat dryer or whatever.
Yeah, solids.
So they're looking at like $80 million?
Actually, I'm scheduling something.
It's 5.
We only pay
Yeah,
20.
it's 100.
Yeah,
110.
It's like 110, 115 million dollars over 5 years.
Really?
But we're working with them to separate out what we feel is capital due to growth, to take it off of our ratepayers, off our operating reserves, and push it onto capital, which is for growth. Historically, they're not, majority of the projects are replacement, they do, but they do have a component this time. That's growth.
And
Okay.
they have a need for this.
So the next page I'm going to show you, so this is what I call our summary, our CIP master. This is developed using each one of these project pages. So staff enters this into the system for each project they request. They put in a description. So this page right
Is
here.
that a bug up
That's
there?
a dung beetle.
This is actually page 76 of your page. So if you go through that one, it'll be on page 76.
Nicely done.
That's it, done, dude.
So the reason I use this page is because it's the first new project request there under the Encina, so it's the $1,095,000. So I figured that'd be a good example. So first you enter a description of the project, then you have the project manager. It's assigned the project number through the
Do you
process.
actually have clip art for all this, or did you have to make that?
No, the people get creative with it. Yeah,
Mhm.
we've allowed certain freedoms, I guess, in the pictures.
We're not creating these.
No.
Yeah. So,
Under Wes's new regime, he's looking at reining that in, I think.
yeah, maybe a
So
little
they have a
bit.
little animated corner in his office or something.
Jason gets creative with these pictures. He likes to do that. You didn't come up with a dung beetle, did you?
Can't recall. Send it around.
Yeah, you running for
Depends on
office?
what,
Yeah.
depends on whether you guys like it or not.
Really? I can't recall.
So on the right side, you'll see the department that's requesting it and the funding source. So whether it be water, sewer, replacement capacity. The next section down here is a justification for the project. And then at the bottom, we have the project spending plan over the next 5 years and out actually, and the estimated project timeline. So all that gets summarized in that CIP master and they're listed as all together. And from there, I'm going to pass it over to James and Jason.
Okay,
unless you have
quick question, going back to the boll weevil here. So what is this for? Is this for Meadowlark?
Yes.
Okay. So we just did something with the basins out there. Didn't we just do something out there?
Place the filter media.
Yeah, this is filter media. So this isn't actually, this is aeration. This is a completely different basin.
Okay.
And basically, what we're looking at doing is separating the aeration basin out with the type of sewers we're getting, the strength of sewer we're getting. There's a more efficient way technology has changed to basically, it's a biological selector. We could actually reduce by about 80-85% the amount of phosphorus. That is not phosphorus, but
Yeah, it's phosphorus.
yeah, phosphorus. Thank you.
Yep.
That is being in our recycled water. The phosphorus in our recycled water creates massive algae blooms in our Mar Reservoir, which causes us to use a lot of chemicals and causes chemical additions both at the plant and at Mar to treat that algae bloom. The algae bloom causes a bug called the boatman,
Water boatman.
water boatman, to the larva to go
What page is that
crazy.
picture on?
Yeah, it's right there. It's to basically get crazy by eating. They basically eat the algae, and they get clogged in the filters, and some of them get pulverized. They get clogged in people's sprinkler systems.
Okay.
So basically, you have to treat the source and move down. And also, it also provides us with a little better positioning on looking at our agreements with our agencies. If we are providing them with better water, then maybe we should get paid more.
Yeah, that contract is up when?
2025.
When now? A long way away. How long was the contract for?
It's 5 years with re-ups, I believe, but that could be the other one. But I believe it's 2025, and the contract was, I think, penned in 2005. But I'm going off memory, so I'm not 100% sure.
The automatic
sounds about
re-ups, or the re-ups to say,
They're automatic re-ups unless there's an issue. So,
wasn't there an issue before this?
but unless like Carlsbad or Livenheim or us say we have an issue, we want to renegotiate. Nobody's actually said that yet.
Oh.
So.
So from the boll weevil, or whatever it is,
It's a scarab. That's a polite term.
from there I'll pass it on to, oh, and just to answer your question, I pulled up the Encina thing real quick. $124 million over the next 5 years.
Wow.
So of that,
And this is just $2 million to get rid of this bug,
yep, get rid of the budget, so
which saves us money.
it's a cheap
It's
budget.
it's $1 million.
Clean McMar all the time, as well as
It's
we
chemical
end up with a
costs.
better product.
Yeah.
So from there, I'll pass it on to James, Jason, and Ed actually to go over some projects for this year.
Yeah,
For
let's
the current capital budget.
pass this on. I'm going to show you where we are in the process. And
These
where we're
individual
going.
sheets?
Yeah, they're individual. Just go ahead. They're same. That's one for you also. We have enough for everybody. Okay. So
Ooh.
as you may, I don't know,
Ooh.
a lot of colors.
Looks like engineering.
Colors for confusion.
Looks like a
Um,
video game.
As you may recall, last year when we gave the CIP, it was a little later. It was during the final budget review process, and we went over the vetting process that we do both in engineering and operations, where the majority of the CIP comes from. But the board or the committee wasn't really part of that process because it was already done. So this time we're a little early on, so we wanted to take the opportunity to kind of go through our process. So before, it was kind of already a polished product, a fairly polished product, in which the finance manager, operations, and engineering managers already went through it. We made our cuts, supervisors made their cuts, we made our cuts, and then we prioritized. And there was a couple questions last year on what do you do to prioritize? Well, the next several spreadsheets are kind of what we do in engineering to prioritize and how we work with operations, because it kind of trickles back and forth between us. And what I wanted to show is we basically initially get everybody's requests. So all those sheets that you have, each one of those line items in that master sheet creates an individual sheet like that. And that gets placed into an electronic system, e-logger. And from there, immediately both Ed's staff and Jason from my staff looks at it and starts going, I can't do all that work in 1 year. I need to push things in. Just instinctively know there's no way we're going to get a permit from an environmental agency within 12 months. That's at least 2 years away. So we automatically start prioritizing and shifting projects. Once that's first vetted through, there's usually some back and forth conversations between operations saying we can't get to that project. Ed has done a great job, especially in the last couple of years, kind of paring down the priorities on what capital projects come from operations. And then finally, we put it into a spreadsheet like this. And what this shows us, both Jason and I, is where are we spending the money. So now just go through the spreadsheet. You have your fiscal years going across. You have your projects. And if you look at this, what we have is operations-based projects that engineering is planning on working on. And then you have CIP projects that engineering is planning on working on. So this will be the majority of the workload for the engineering staff. Now, Jason's staff is a yeoman's group of 3. So that you got to keep that in consideration. So if you look at kind of the pale orange or beige lines, we separate it out into how much are we spending in construction. So how much of that money is in construction compared to how much is not in construction, because that tells me where the level of effort is. So in other words, construction dollars being spent by contractors. It's not a lot of labor hours. So I know that contractors can spend millions of dollars if it's a big project, and it takes tens of hours of us to manage it. You know, a lot of inspection hours, less engineering hours, some operation hours. But if it's in planning or design, almost all that money is going to be either consulting or staff hours. So then you can start figuring out how much staff allocation you have. So that's what we do. So we do it for 2 different groups. We do it for the operations initiated or requested items, and we do it for the larger group, which is a CIPs. And from here, what this tells me is, we have $1.36 million of roughly $1.4 million in operations items. So because if you look at the previous year, which is this fiscal year that we're ending, a lot of that design and planning work, all these different lines, the blue being planning, the black being design, the yellow is really approval. That's our whole bid and board approval process. And then green is construction. So that work has happened. So majority of that operations requested work, we're going to be constructing now. So it's kind of the fruits of the labor are happening that fiscal year. If you look at the CIP, which is the second grouping of projects, the larger grouping of projects, that is another where you can see some construction going on, but we have construction really ramping up, and then we have new planning design jobs at the bottom ramping up, and then a lot of projects being pushed out. And we kind of planned this work out so we could see our staffing levels right. Do we need more CIP? Do we need more consulting help? Do we need less? Do we need to push projects, accelerate them, and where they come in? Now, what ends up happening is there's emergency projects, other things, and they slip in, and they shift schedules. And that's just a fact of life. But we're working diligently between Ed and I to try and reduce that as much as we can, humanly possible at least.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, you're looking at $5.9 million of $7 million. So that, again, a significant amount of construction. So when I see all those construction dollars, if we get the construction schedule started on time, it's a good chance we're going to spend that money. And then I go back to the finance manager and after this and I say, I have a pretty good surety as long as my construction schedules don't slip, that we're going to be spending a significant amount of that money, because majority of it is construction dollars. On a year that majority of it is planning and design dollars, the assurances that you're going to spend that much money isn't as great, because if an environmental, you find a bird on site, that could delay your job by a year, and you're basically slowed it down. So there's a lot more that could go wrong once you get into construction, unless you dig up something, which we kind of do our due diligence beforehand, but it still can happen. You could dig up a relic or something like that, or a nice pot. You're more assured that you're going to actually finish with that schedule. Contractor schedules slip, but they're not going to slip by a year. An environmental permit could slip you several years. So that's kind of how it's done. Now, I showed a few other columns down below, and one of the things in the third section down here where it says,
And see the parallelogram.
well, before we get there, I'll get right to that. But where it says asset management.
Single focus.
I know. And then you
Save
see
it
future
for
projects. So Wes mentioned that there's $22 million in future projects. And I want to clarify, there's $22 million in master plan identified future projects. Those are future projects that need upsizing. Okay, so there's a growth component to that, but primarily it's replacement, but there's growth. When we look at aging infrastructure, when we look at replacement projects, pure replacement projects, the master plan doesn't cover that at all. There's zero projects in the master plan for pure replacement. Not all, but a majority of the operations-based projects that come every year are replacement projects. They're not master plan projects at all. They're still capital projects. They just come out of a operating reserve instead of a capital reserve. So they come out of user rates instead of developer capacity fees, essentially. So when you look at that $22 million in future projects, and you see they don't really start hitting until the year 2022, or even majority of them. And if you look above it, you see this big blue line under basically ongoing projects. It says asset management schedule. We're embarking on an asset management program, and the reason we're doing this is you don't want to replace that infrastructure too soon, or you want to replace it just in time, basically. So, for example, we have steel lines that go all the way up to North Vista, or a steel line that brings water in from Escondido into our downtown area. Those are very long, large steel lines, and replacing those lines is $15, $16, $17, $18 million easy. Before we really even get into the environmental concerns of traffic and everything else.
And they were put into the 50s.
And they were put in the 50s.
Ooh.
But there's certain sections that are bad. There's certain sections that we've never had a problem with. So over the next several years, we're going to be developing an asset management program where we go out and we actually video, we do an assessment, we put the instruments inside of the pipe that actually take the thickness of the steel to start identifying sections that we need to replace. If we get typical results, 70 to 80% of that pipe is probably good. So instead of replacing, just to make the math easy, $20 million in pipe, you're going to be saving basically $14 to $16 million of that and not spending out of our user rates. So that's the power of the asset management.
But for how long do you save it? I mean, that pipe obviously has wear.
Sure.
Just not as much as other parts.
Well, there's technology now that James and I are looking at to see what's going to be the most cost effective and show us the best results. But there is technology that'll tell you the exact thickness of the steel line, where it's failing, how much you have left, where there's tiny leaks that have already started, and they pinpoint it within inches.
But to kind of get to your question, sooner or later you're going to have to replace that whole pipe, right?
Right.
Absolutely. But if you are assuming a normal depreciation rate, a pipe's going to last 75 years, you have to, and it's $20 million, you have to collect for that $20 million in today's dollars.
Right.
So it'll be more than $20 million tomorrow over that 75 years. If you know you could extend that life for 100 years, 150 years, then the amount that you have to collect from your users is going to be less. At the end of the day, if you think about it this way, at the end of the day, you have somewhere between $600 and $650 million worth of assets in the ground. Okay, all of it needs to be replaced, and all of it. And if you replace it all based on a straight line schedule, our reserves are pathetically low. Mm-hmm. So that's what those reserves, that floor and ceiling, that's what they're used for. There's no money being spent out of it now as far as future, but as you start replacing all this infrastructure. The reason why we need a reserve, a high reserve ceiling, or I don't know the right terminology, but the reason why you need it is because a majority of our infrastructure is fairly new. A lot of San Marcos is built recently. I mean, if you've been around San Marcos for 30 plus years, you've seen it turn from mobile homes and chicken ranches and cow ranches to, you know, big suburbia basically. That's all new infrastructure. So that's going to start, a lot of infrastructure built in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s is all going to come due. Now on the flip side of that, we have ductile iron infrastructure that's prematurely breaking.
Well, we're lucky we have that in
So.
there. During the growth period.
So the goal of the asset management program and that is different. It's to find out when to replace that infrastructure before it causes expensive emergency repairs, because emergency repairs or unscheduled repairs comes out of our reserves also. So if we could plan on replacing projects, which that money still comes out of our reserves, it's a lot cheaper to have a scheduled repair than an emergency repair. So that's the goal of that with the ductile iron infrastructure. So it's really a two-pronged approach, but at the end of the day, if you get similar results as, you know, successful agencies putting it, you're actually extending the life of your assets. You're actually going to reduce the amount of expenses to our ratepayers over the long run. The fruit of it won't pay out for, you know, 10, 20 years, but it's the cost of it is well worth it. So when you see that big future project, you have to understand that that's only the future project that is identified in the master plan. It does not include a single replacement project, and that number is really understated. I don't know by how much, but probably less than half. I mean, if it's probably like 50 to 60 million future projects, in reality were replacements.
And really, the board, you just took action on an item last meeting that is the initial part of our asset management plan and looking at different technologies, and that was the
pilot
lining
test.
of those two different streets.
Right.
So those are some of the technologies James and I and Jason, when we go to these conferences, we find out what's out there, we talk to other agencies, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And then the asset management part is something that, you know, we're just at we have an informal asset management program, but we really need to,
It's a knowledge-based program.
yeah, we need to push it forward.
But it sounds like steel lasts the longest.
Steel can last the longest.
If it's properly installed and
Actually,
properly protected.
AC can last the longest, but they
But
don't make asbestos cement pipe anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes
And we
sense.
actually have a lot of that in the ground, so that's actually,
Great.
we're very
So-
fortunate.
Let's get to your outfall question now. So
Yeah.
before we go to the next page, well, actually, why don't we hand that out because the outfall's the top one there anyway. So why
Came
don't you-
prepared for the question.
Top sheet
Came
is
prepared.
next year, and the bottom sheet's
How much money are we saving by not running the air conditioning today?
It's always hot.
This room is always this way, I don't know.
So, but I
I
mean,
thought it was just
but if you think of it, right, you have hundreds of millions of dollars in asset replacement over the next 50 years easily. That is where the savings, potential savings can be. I mean, we're not talking about $1 million here, $1 million there, we're talking about hundreds of millions. So, so you have two sheets in front of you. One sheet that has the more colors, we'll call it the colorful one, is the 17-18. This is this current year sheet. This is what our staff is working on. The colors are for our internal use. I just left them, which is we went ahead and prioritized even from that project what we're going to work on first and foremost. What is the important projects to get out? And we have the new projects, we have the carryover projects up top, and then we have the new projects. And from there, you can see last year, from a fiscal year standpoint, we had 5.77 million in fiscal year 17-18 carryover projects, and 1.5 million basically for 7.25 million dollars worth of projects last fiscal year. And you know, I compare it to I have a separate sheet from last year like this to figure out where that money's being spent, whether it's being spent in construction dollars, consultant dollars, and how much time. And then you know we have all a bunch of miscellaneous projects. These are everything from.
Who are the consultants we generally hire?
It's different for each one depending on the need. We do a lot in house when we can because we do a lot.
I was just gonna ask, don't we do a lot in-house?
We do a lot of smaller projects in house, but then when you get to and we do a lot of our own construction management. We have a lot of expertise between our inspectors and our staff and managing construction jobs. Jason used to be a contractor. I used to be the construction manager here at Otay Water District. I was the construction manager, and our inspectors work both on the private and public side. And then Jason and I both have private and public experience. So we have strong construction management team here. So we do most of that in-house instead of getting a consultant, which saves a lot of money. But from the design side, we're more limited. We don't have the reproduction skills or facilities or staff, really. So when we have a larger design job, we usually have to get a consultant. And larger construction jobs, we'll get a consultant mainly because we just don't have the time and resources to put everybody on that job.
But that
So-
consultant's a pass-through expense.
Not for capital, but for developers, yes. So when we're talking development, basically everything is a pass-through expense for development when it's directly to a developer. But for a
Capital,
job,
it's ours.
for a job like capital, you can see the funding sources. If there's usually a split. So this one is 100% for reclaim. Another job, if you look at the individual sheet, maybe a 50-50. So 50% out of rates, 50% out of capacity fees. And it shows you water and sewer. So then when you compare it to our draft of 2018, that's the one without the colors, and you can see we have roughly about the same amount, 7.3 million. So it went up a little bit, but you saw all the construction dollars, and but the total went up to 82 million for
Right.
CIP. Majority of that's the outfall. Outfall is about 13 of that increase. But if you look at the outfall expense, we're looking at $270,000 in outfall expense this fiscal year. So we actually have to get serious about spending some money on the outfall now, because we've been trying to push it back, because it's such a huge project.
And when we say the outfall, we're actually saying to correct part of it or to install a new one?
To actually, so there's two parts of it. There's a parallel portion that goes from basically underneath Albertsons. There's a 50-foot tunnel underneath Albertsons on Rancho Santa Fe, and
50-foot tunnel?
50 feet underneath
Oh,
Albertsons.
okay.
Okay? And it pops out over there by that nursery. I don't know what that nursery's called. It pops out and it's gravity kind of through that canyon. And then over by the Laurels development, it turns into a siphon. So that siphon there is a 14,000 foot pressurized siphon that back in 98, when did it break?
Shh, we did not discuss.
Okay, so at one
I
point,
thought that was Carlsbad.
no, that was,
No, this was.
that's different.
No.
So anyway, so back in 2005 when I first started, I put a new outfall section in from the Laurels, where it starts, over to Melrose. And we abandoned in place the other section. So we have a new,
How long was that piece?
that's about a mile.
That's what-
About 5,000 feet of the 14,000 plus feet.
Wow.
That 14,000 feet takes you all the way to El Camino Real.
And what size is that pipe?
24 inch, and the new pipe is PVC. The old pipe's ductile iron,
And how big was that one?
24 inch.
So we replaced it with the same size.
Yeah, we replaced it with the same size. The intent in the master plan, even back from 2002, was there was going, and even back in the 90s, was there's going to be a 24 inch, a parallel 24 inch. Okay, so we didn't fill that old one with concrete, but the lining technology that was available in 2005 was very expensive to do. So we didn't line it. So what we did is we just abandoned it in place. So technically, right next to that, from the Laurels to Melrose, right next to it, there's actually a 24-inch ductile iron pipe that's rotting, but is hollow. Yeah, and not filled with concrete. So the intent is we're going to reuse that one day and build that pipe. But the problem is the next section from Melrose all the way to El Camino Real, you have to build another pipe, 24-inch pipe. That's not where it starts. That gives you your $30 million or so in jobs, but then from there, we have to upsize, not all of, but a majority of the pipe between El Camino Real and Encina.
Just grabbed.
That whole distance.
That whole distance. So you got 9 miles of pipe total. We gotta probably touch 7.5 of the 9 mile, or really it's 8 miles of pipe. You gotta probably touch about 7 miles of the 8 miles of pipe, sooner or later. So the new master plan, new draft master plan, which we're gonna have a workshop on the 10th, I believe, correct? That actually separates out into sections. So we're building a portion each phase. The phase is 5 years. So between now and 2020, we'll be probably building a small section. Then next section by 2025, next section. Every 5 years, we're building a portion of it. So there'll actually be 5 projects. Right now, it's marked into one, and I'll discuss with Wes whether we want to separate that onto 5 different projects or not. But at the end of the day, it's a $45 million or $44 million job.
Okay.
So
For all 5 phases.
yeah, but
To get it finished.
understanding there's like the last $4 or $5 million that we have to spend doesn't have to happen until after 2035. So it's just every 5 years you're spending a portion of it.
But we're saying we have enough outfall capacity until 2025,
So right now we have a section.
2035.
Right now we have a section. So instead of looking at the whole pipe as one project and saying it needs to be replaced, we have one section. It's going to cost $2-3 million of construction money, or actually that might be more that first section to replace. But we have to upsize one section to buy us time for
For
next.
capacity.
That's the choke point.
Yep, we have to get rid of the choke points, and then as development builds, it's the next choke point. Now, what this process allows us to do is if we truly get a reduction in gallons per day per capita going down, not coming in, not water being used outside, but actually being flushed down, so to speak, then we can reevaluate. So instead of spending $44 million in the next 10 years, we spend $10 million in the next 10 years, and then look at what is really happening before we spend the rest. But from a planning standpoint, we have to plan that we're going to have to replace every section based on growth. So
What's your educated guess on human nature, on whether or not we're going to be able to obtain that kind of water things internally? People have shut everything off externally. But
yeah, no,
that doesn't
we've
count.
already shown that we're not going to show the reduction in the rate. The biggest reduction in the rate going down the toilet, down the drains that we saw was the recession when businesses were closed and houses were empty. As soon as the businesses came back and houses, it came almost back up to original level. But there has been some reduction. It hasn't been as great as on the water side, but there has been true reduction. So I don't know if you remember the Encina numbers on the reduction from when you're on the MAM.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they've seen a reduction. So and the tightening up the systems, getting rid of the leaky pipes, so to speak, that in itself causes a reduction. Now it's a double-edged sword because the sewer concentration goes up because you have less water mixing with the sewer. So from a cost standpoint, you don't save any money. From a pipeline standpoint, the pipeline doesn't have to be as big. But treatment standpoint, it doesn't help you at all. So
But we are going to need a dual outfall.
yeah, you're gonna need to do outfall for several reasons. Right now, if something goes wrong with an outfall, we have nothing we can do about it. Yeah, it's leaking until it's leaking. You put as much pump in, you gotta wait it out. You gotta bypass as much as you can. There's no way to bypass it. If you had a secondary pressurized section outfall, you could shift flows over to the other side, go in there, open it up, and make a repair. It would be a redundant system.
We don't have that. Right?
And and we already know what happens when you have a leak on that outfall because we don't have a redundant system. We have to just put a Band-Aid on it and manage it the best we can.
So, but we're building it as a redundant system. We're not building as we're going to need both pipes.
No, you need both pipes
Yeah,
anyway.
It won't be fully redundant. It's not like you could run with just flows in one pipe
Yeah.
or the other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What allows you to do though is, let's say, at certain times of the day or if it's not raining a lot, the flows do go down. So you don't need both pipes 24/7. So when those flows go down, we can shift flows over, make a repair.
Right.
So it gives us some flexibility. So I know Ed would love to see that. So, but with the outfall, that's the biggest increase, and the reason for the biggest increase is now we're looking at the whole pipe. The new master plan evaluate the whole pipe, not just the parallel portions. And what we're looking at downstream of El Camino Real, where it's gravity, is replacing it to a bigger size. That portion's not parallel because it's gravity.
If that area that we have, the bad area right now, let's say yesterday, because I don't want to predicate the future.
Yeah.
Yesterday, something blew up on it. What's our response? What do we do?
I don't know. What can you do if the siphon blows up?
There are blow-offs and
Yeah, that we put in.
so many pieces of section. There's a valve and a connecting point. So the best we could hope for is to run a bypass past the break and down into another one. But you got to remember that size is not going to be big enough to handle the flow. So we'd be trying to pump out the best we can. Probably what would really happen is we would try to capture the flow in a natural basin downstream,
At the
and it
creek.
would take a long time to remove all of that wastewater. But diverting it out of it, you'd almost have to create another spill upstream purposely
Yeah.
out of a manhole and divert that into a creek, and then you'd have to make your repairs while that's going to the environment. You're trying to keep it from the ocean.
Yeah, because that follows that canyon where there's a creek, so you
Yeah.
could dump it into the creek and
Right.
dam off where it goes underneath the road crossing,
We
create
have-
a lake of sewage, and then pump it back into the
We
system
have some
downstream of
plans
the break.
built on that, and we've actually been working with our regulators, and they still haven't gotten back to us after a year and a half. We said, we'd really like to discuss this whole thing with you, and where would you like to see us stop, to do the least amount of damage to the environment, stop the flow, and collect it, and where would you like us to sample? Because the last time we had a spill when the 16-inch broke, we just started sampling where we thought was best, and they said, well, yeah, that's great, but you really didn't have to go there, you could have gone here, and it's like, well, you guys don't get back to us in time. We're supposed to sample immediately. We need a plan. And so we've reached out to them, they still haven't.
Yeah, and specifically about the outfall, just to give you an idea.
You in your mind have a plan.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, we don't want it just to be in our mind. Like,
Right.
we
Like that.
need to be able to have it written down.
So specifically with the outfall, we have a bottleneck section that's about 11 million gallons per day as the capacity. It's a gravity section. And then we have also several sections that are in the 12s, 12 point, so between 12 and 12.9. Our average flows are about 7 right now.
A little over 6.
Yeah, 7 point. Okay, so a little over 6. But our peak flows
6 a day.
6 a day. But our
Going to Encino.
yeah, but our peak flows every day from a gallon per minute. If you converted that to million gallons, obviously it doesn't stay up here the whole time. It comes down, but when it's up here every day, get close to that 10 or hit 10, 11, 12. Every day. Maybe not quite that high. About 9 now.
Depends on the time.
Yeah, this is without rain. And then we see 14 million gallons on a peak capacity during big rain events, especially on the second or third rain event of the season. We saw 14, easily saw 14. Now, it's not all day long, but when it's rain event, instead of just being a peak right here, it does elongate it. And we already know that our siphon, which is that 14,000 feet, has a capacity of 12.9, which means it's surcharging. So it's pressurizing sections that weren't meant to be pressurized. And the manhole's surcharging up, and it's backing sections up that are gravity sections, that are clay, gravity sections, and those sections are pressurized. So those aren't good scenarios. We know the siphon, you can technically push more through because it's a pressurized pipe, but the domino effect of that is you're making everything else weaker. That's not meant to handle that load. So we need to fix that small 10-point something section, and we need to start working on the siphon because we already know we exceed that siphon. Because unfortunately, it's like that level of service for roads, that example I use.
Right.
We have to be a level of service A with that pipe all the time because we can't afford it to back up.
Right.
So right now there's enough safety factors in the system that every day when it backs up a little bit, or any rain event that it backs up a little bit, we're using systems that really shouldn't be used under pressure, only for an hour every now and then or minutes, but still it's not good to use it that way. So there is a need for the replacement of the outfall, but we're not going to be spending $44 million in the next 5 years. It's basically the message I want to portray about the outfall. To get back to the actual CIP process now. So now we kind of have an understanding of, I have 3 people working on this, plus myself. This is where we're spending the money, and this is who's assigned to the project. And from here, we refine it one more time. So this is the part that hasn't happened yet. From here, Jason, his staff, and myself will refine it one more time. We'll work with Ed on some priorities, saying, hey, can we push this? What needs to be accelerated? Where's your priority? He'll work with his supervisors. From there, it gets inputted electronically into the system, and Wes will take a look at it, input it all, and then he'll start on the revenues, correct? How many meters do we think we're going to sell? to cover some of the cap fees and do the 5-year projection on that. From there, he'll look at the revenue sources and come back to me usually and say, hey, is there a way we could defer? Now, if it's a rate issue, because remember, majority of the projects don't hit rates. Okay? So the parallel land outfall doesn't hit rates hard. Okay? San Marcos Interceptor hits rates some because we're replacing an existing pipe, but doesn't hit rates hard. So when you see the big numbers, those aren't really your savings on rates. They hit cap fees. So we're looking at two things. In the next 5 years, compared to how much money we're going to spend, where are we in cap fees? And that kind of tells you that pressure, and this goes to another subject, whether we need to go out for debt financing or not. And you know, how adamant is it, can we delay the project? Now, the recession was beautiful. We were able to delay. So can we still continue doing that? I don't know yet. And then the other portion is, how much of our reserves are we going to be taking out to do some of these replacement projects? And that's where the balancing act comes in. And what typically happens is, you know, in the past I'd get a call from Tom, and I have a bad Tom puppet, so I won't try. And he'll ask me to move some money around where I can. I'll look through everything. I'll look at our workload. Yeah, and I'll do it. Next year I'll do a West puppet.
Okay.
So this year my expectation is Wes will call me after he gets the revenues in and be like, hey James, we need to move this much off of capital. We need to move this much off of reserves, if we need to. And then I'll sit down with my staff and we'll finagle and move priorities around. At that point is when you guys, as a committee, first see it, typically. Okay? So I expect all these numbers to change slightly. Now, Jason, this is your 3rd year doing this, Jason?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's gotten very good. So last year there were some changes, but they weren't significant. The first couple of years we won't talk about, but last year was significant. So no, he's done a great job. So he already kind of understands what we're looking for, and he's a realist when it comes to I can't do all this work. I don't have the staff to do all this work. So, and even getting consultants, still there's an assumption of a certain amount, because we have to manage the consultants. We can't just let them run the show. I mean, we have to, you know, guide them and make sure and give them information, make sure we review their information to get our money's worth. So there's a level of effort even with consultants there. So at the end of the day, we try to balance our workload with the request. Now, one of the big things I want to highlight out from the engineering side is if you look at the new projects, and the majority of new projects are ops requests projects, and this is more kudos to Ed. In 2017-18, the old sheet, you had $1.5 million in ops projects for the fiscal year, and this year we're down to $890,000, and that rings true with the new requests. I think last year's new project requests were like 25,
25 for about $5.5 million.
and this year is
12 for 2.4.
Yeah. So if you look at that, you know, we're basically sending the message down staff from management that we need to get our existing projects done before we start requesting new projects. And the trickle down of this is a couple things. It's less pressure on rates because, you know, we're doing the replacement, but then the asset manager and the future projects are still looming out there, so we have to have a plan. And you're going to see more pipeline, you know, videoing, pipeline assessment, and asset management stuff coming the board's way. The big picture item is we have you know, $600+ million worth of infrastructure that need replacement, and if you could defer that, double the life of that, that also helps on the finance side.
Sure.
So with that, I could answer, or Jason could answer any specific items that you have on actual the capital carryover and new requests. I'm sure Ed could probably answer a lot of new request items.
I just want to say Jason brought more paper than I did.
Yeah.
Well,
Just in case there's questions, I got backups.
Yeah, yes, this is what's generated out of the electronic system for the CIP.
That's my backups.
So we have it.
Mike's got 24,000 liters.
Yeah.
No comparison.
Yeah, no comparison.
Mike wins hands down.
The only thing I can even compare to close to Mike is we have 5 years worth of meter records data for the master plan. That's about it. But we only do that once every like 6-7 years. He does it every year.
He gets ready to push a button, though, he goes boom, 250,000.
So.
Great presentation.
Are there any projects that you'd like to hear more about next time, in like a particular focus?
No, all the projects I've seen that we've seen over the years, Understandable. The outfall is what I always had a question about.
Yeah,
It made perfect sense today. You explained it today. I haven't ever had it explained to me quite that way.
well, it's really our first opportunity to kind of dive into it too.
Oh, yeah, no,
So-
it's been explained to me by other people, not you.
So,
Kind of here.
All right, Wes?
So, unfortunately, I don't have any more cool pictures to show you.
Oh,
Yeah, no. But next we'll go into the vehicles and equipment as promised.
Any videos? Do you have any departments make a little video of it?
I did a good sexual reference.
I can just leave the, my sheets.
How to?
Just leave it when it comes up.
Okay, so this is the vehicles and equipment page. This is after the capital budget page.
What page is that?
It is
96.
96? Okay. Mike says it's 96.
Because when I just took a brief look at this, they were replacing the entire fleet.
Yeah, it's 96, it's a single,
well, that first one that he has circled is actually a carryover because
the one.
Peterbilt.
It's in the one page.
Is the one page?
Yeah, it should have been right here.
Yeah.
Here you go.
There it is.
So, as Ed was mentioning, I just wanted to, I circled it for a reason. Most of the time, our vehicles and equipment are pretty simple. You purchase them, they're done, so they usually get done the year that they're requested once they're approved. We had a delay with the dump truck, Ed, if you want to explain, so it didn't actually get purchased this year.
Well, it was ordered almost right when we
Right.
hit in the new fiscal year, and we've been chasing after it. But Peterbilt is basically back ordered us all the way until September to get our truck. So,
Can I
Business,
ask a question?
business must be good, huh?
yeah,
How many 10-wheel dump trucks do we now have?
we don't have any. We've been actually this is one that's been requested for
Well,
probably the last 6 years.
Leads to my next question.
Pushed back.
Can't you rent them when you need them?
No,
We don't use it
not
that
a
often.
not a 10-wheeler. You can get the bobtails that we currently have, but a 10-wheeler you can't rent.
No?
No, and it's common practice for the agencies to have at least one 10-wheeler. It hauls a lot more material. You can get stuff done a lot faster. We actually have our own materials pile now.
That's what I was gonna point out.
Yeah, so we actually are hauling a lot of material and we're making lots of trips with the bobtails. We basically carry twice as much in one truck,
Yeah, it saves on labor and return trip.
and even on
It's all about,
even on fuel. You know.
it's all about return time when you're touching dirt.
And I understand. I just it's kind of like, in my mind, how I equate it is like having that boat in the backyard so you can go fishing. It'd be cheaper to go rent a boat whenever you want to go fishing rather than have it in the backyard and have it sitting there the majority of the time doing nothing.
Unfortunately, we can't even like the small dumps that you see on there. Those are trucks that the rental companies don't carry either, and they're
They don't care
they're
about that?
they're beat. No, I teased the construction supervisor. I said, I see those ones that down at Home Depot. Won't they work?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
And you
yeah.
can plan your fishing trips. We can't always plan when we need, haul
Yeah,
material.
no.
Oh, I know. I don't know. In my mind, co-oping. Not everybody uses that. Every water district doesn't have to have one. It's like every fire department doesn't have to have a 100-foot ladder.
Well,
They all want to have one because but they don't have to.
This one will get used a lot. This is something that we've been.
Does it negate the need for a small dump because it does twice as much work?
No, our crews are busy. The small dumps are good for one particular job, and then the large dump truck will be definitely used for others. But
So how many small dump trucks do we have right now?
2. That's why, and we actually need to replace both because the engines are. Ford came out with it's a 6.8 liter diesel motor that eats itself alive. They quit making it, but we had unfortunately bought a lot of vehicles with that motor in it, and so you'll see next year and the year after that, we could have about 15 vehicles on this page right here.
It's
Just
kind of
what
like
you
your
see.
ductile iron.
Kind of. But this time it was Ford that sold us a motor that.
How many miles do your trucks have on them?
Actually, they have quite a few. The 179 is, I think, at 100,000 miles. The small dumps, they're I think in the 70s. The construction crew truck 198, that one may not seem to have a lot of mileage on it. At I think it's at 86,000, but it's a crucial truck. That's the one that has all the doors and everything along the sides, and it's got all the equipment in the back. And everything.
Utility type of thing?
Yeah, it's a utility truck, and you can't rent
That
those
says
at all. Plus all
construction crew truck. Does that mean
That's
is it a crew cab type of thing as well?
no, We call it a construction crew truck because each crew is assigned one of those trucks, and they've got a dump truck, they've got a backhoe, so that's just what
Oh,
they,
each
that's
crew
just,
has their own,
yes.
but doesn't that mean that sometimes they're not in service? Because every crew's not working all the time, are they?
And every crew's working unless their equipment's down, and if their equipment's down, then they're working on other projects.
There's only 2 crews.
Yeah.
Oh.
But Ed,
okay, thank you.
also, I could be wrong, but are those vehicles, the run hours are more important because they're running when they're dumping or using the motor, so it's
Yeah,
not
the-
just mileage.
The
it's
mileage, that's what I was saying, the mileage is kind of, seems like,
Misleading.
yeah, misleading. 179 is actually our landscaper's truck, and that one, it's kind of embarrassing to see it go down the road, actually. It's pretty beat up. It's one of our oldest
wanna have a
vehicles
nice-
on the road right now.
We want to have a good-looking, reliable fleet.
Well,
How about the Jeep? We're gonna replace the Jeep? Or we're gonna save that for 100 years for some reason?
The classic is worth
pride
going
of
out
the
there was
district.
yesterday.
Well, it's out now.
Didn't they used to do a parade or something with a Jeep?
Yeah,
They used to
it
do
used to
it
be in the parade.
it used to be on the parade, yeah.
Betty had to drive it.
Yeah.
But I think she's no one was allowed to drive it.
We should drive it up to the street fair next week.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah,
a
It,
tricky
I'm
stick.
sure it doesn't drive.
It
push it, we can push it to the street car.
it broke down during one of the parades. I know.
Kylie tow it?
I
I think I heard that. Kylie tow it, yeah.
don't know.
Okay, so you need all those trucks?
Yep.
Yeah, good equipment, I agree.
I was going to mention something on the. I think that's a carryover on the portable toilet. That was from last year. We already got
Okay.
that.
Yeah, we can take that out.
Yeah, so that's. I don't remember them making a request for a second one. So
Okay.
I think.
We have a portable toilet?
Yeah.
Why do we rent the
except for
toilets from
cruise.
Diamond Environmental? When there are other places to rent them from.
Oh, you're talking. Well, we aren't renting that. That's
Not that, but there are other ones we rent, don't we?
We have one.
I see Diamond Environmental
We
once in a
have,
while.
we do
I'm like,
have
wow.
one at Mar, and we did actually look to see if we could get it from other companies, and there are no other local companies that are available that are as low a cost, I guess I would say, as they are. We
That's
did,
because they have to dump properly.
yeah,
They can't afford it.
I did have this discussion with the general manager. We're not real comfortable about continuing a relationship with
I
them.
mean,
but-
it is a question in my mind, and when I say like, why are we still doing business with them?
So that's the vehicles and equipment. You have a question?
No, good.
And there's only one carryover. The rest of the vehicles from last year, I believe, were all purchased, except for we got the duplicate that needs to be taken off on the
On
portable
the
toilet.
portable toilet, yeah.
Let me ask you a question on the portable toilet, out of curiosity, what is the price of that thing?
We actually purchased one that is not just for use of the construction crew. It's two toilets on a trailer, and it's actually nicer than we normally buy. When we have water main breaks, which unfortunately are quite frequently, we park it and let the customers use. So we deliver them water, and they don't have water to flush their toilets. So we set it in the middle of whatever street it is we're working on, and we let the customers know that they can use our
That's an excellent.
toilet. So that was actually our construction supervisor's idea. I said, hey, instead of going and buying out one that's, kind of not shabby looking, but, it's a one person, and so it actually is a nice.
Does it look really nice?
Yeah, it actually does. Yeah.
We bring that to the street fair.
It's solar, it's, got solar
Be a
power.
heck of a street fair.
So at night it actually has lights that are, batteries that charge, so solar during the day.
Really?
So you can actually use it at night too.
You could tow the restroom out there with the Jeep.
Take a picture.
You get to drive.
Put it on the next video
Interesting.
concept that we send out to a million
Aren't you
people.
not supposed to be egging them on?
Man, got cold down here. I don't know.
So from there, we'll talk about the next step in the budget process. So
Before we do that,
Sure.
is the audio video enhancements for downstairs, is that in here, as a capital improvement, or is that not a capital
It's
improvement?
in
Yeah,
this year.
yeah, it's in there.
Uh,
It's in the CIP.
I saw the
master.
bathroom, but I can't find
It
the,
is
Where's
page
the bathroom?
52.
Where's the
Should
bathroom?
be page 52 in your packet.
Yep,
Okay.
52.
I passed it.
No, we got to it. Where's the bathroom? Is that page
It's,
52 also?
That's probably around there.
No, it's
Locker rooms.
Oh, it's 56.
Yeah, that's 56.
Yeah.
goes in the locker room.
So we're still got another 400K to go this year on that sucker?
On the
440,
audiovisual?
yeah.
Yeah.
Audio visual.
No, on the bathroom.
Yeah, it's 440, right? I believe.
395.
No, it's up. Like I said, my sheet's a little bit more updated. It's 440
Oh.
based on the bid opening. So the 390 whatever was based on the architect's estimate, and with the bid opening, it's 440.
I think both of these projects are going to the engineering committee tomorrow.
Yeah, so both going to the engineering committee tomorrow. The bid opening for audio visual is Thursday. Though. It got pushed to Thursday,
Yeah, I saw
so we won't have that information until the end of the week. So.
We've already spent $235,000 on the locker.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the consulting was over $100 and something thousand just by itself, especially with the redesign training. You gotta remember we designed it 2.5 times. So far, absolutely.
We're done.
Jason's one request is let's make a decision on this.
So,
So he can work on his other
so
projects.
even worse than that, I shouldn't say worse. Even more interesting than that is we've already spent 455,000 on the audio video.
Well, that was
No, that's
all these upgrades.
remember it was one CIP project for all the audiovisual upgrades, and then because of budget reasons we cut it back. I think you were at the board meeting and you said,
Yeah.
you know, in the interest of saving money, let's not do the boardroom
Yeah.
upgrades.
Okay.
So, but that whole budget was cut back to just that fiscal year. So the total budget is for all the AV upgrades for both facilities here and Monarch. So that the
And that's still-
conference rooms and the
the training room was a
training
big,
room and the metal
chunk
arcs
of
already
that.
been done.
because that's our EOC, so there was a lot of work done in that training room to make it into our emergency operations
I
center.
mean, they
Out
trenched
of
the
curiosity,
floor.
what was done?
They completely remodeled the room. They had to cut channels in the concrete. They take out the carpet. They cut channels in the concrete to run
Electric.
power and communication ports.
Couldn't run that through the ceiling?
You can't plug in to the ceiling. You'd be like Chris on that chair trying to get in during EOC.
Hey, nobody's got on the stool yet.
Is that training room? Is that the room that we go into when we do the tours right over here?
Probably at the far end.
Yeah, the far
Yeah,
end.
it used to be a smoky back room.
So you have the big screens, screens on the side.
Except for no smoking.
We have our radios in there so that we can talk to our staff out in the field. We can also talk to all agencies in the county during the big events.
Still seems like a lot of money. 400.
Everybody has to have an EOC, by
But-
the way.
but we-
Everybody has to have
But we have an alternate
Yeah, you can't borrow one of those.
one.
alternate EOC down at Meadowlark.
Yeah.
So
So we
there's
have two.
But also, the Metal Arc staff can teleconference in. So, in other words, instead of having to leave Metal Arc to come here for a training, they can sit in their conference room and live video conference in for trainings instead of having to drive everybody here, sit through a training, and drive back.
because there's always got to be somebody to plan. So.
Yeah. If somebody has to miss a training, then we'd have to schedule another training just for that person.
Does it always have to be someone at the plant?
During the day when they're running stuff,
Oh,
because
9 to 5, 8 to 5.
So you're anticipating the boardroom
mostly because they're getting deliveries.
for the construction part of it?
They have samples they have to take each day.
Yeah,
Are they on
the
the,
bid opening is Thursday, and then there's
70
usually a
program over
good
there?
2
They're-
months.
they're on the
period for
980, yeah.
procurement.
They're the
same
By
way.
the time
They used to be on a
you get
different schedule, but
another month or so to
it
get
didn't
to
make
the
sense
board,
to me.
maybe
It
less. In
actually
this case,
cost
we're
us
thinking
more
about going
overtime
to
the way it was
second
scheduled
meeting
was,
in
plus
April,
they could have no life and we
to
couldn't
the
keep
board meeting
employees.
for that.
So once we switched from 980,
And then,
OT went way down.
there's always the
We
procurement
have
process,
people
and I'm not,
running away from
this is
the plant.
really kinda out of my wheelhouse, so I don't know how, I know how long it takes to get pipes and valves and
Yeah.
those sorts of, I don't know how long it takes to get this type of equipment, so I we're going on our consultant's estimate on that.
So what are we doing to our boardroom?
I really don't know, I haven't been hands-on in that project.
So there's gonna be new video screens up there, there's gonna be new,
2 screens.
for the general public to see, there's gonna be the new screens and voting apparatus for the board members. There's gonna be a small little staff table that'll be in there. Trying to think what else is in there. Some upgraded lighting. And I've got the latest engineer's estimate on all that.
Yeah, that's right, I'm not as hands-on in that, I can get that information.
Oregon, an electronic voting board, that's all I want
I'm sorry?
to know. An electronic voting board.
Yeah, you'll all have like push button voting and you'll have the display that shows the votes.
like the county has.
Yeah.
Like everybody has.
Yeah, everybody is.
Sold.
So that's $300,000.
Well, there's staff time and consultant time in there, and overhead for.
Just say engineers. That's what I guess.
No, it's not. It's actually not. Time out. It's not. In this case, it's not
This is a
engineers.
joke, yeah, go back.
Guy that installs it
Yeah.
gets $10 an hour.
Yeah, in
You're
this
right.
case, it's not engineers.
Well, 11. Is it 11?
It's actually Wes's staff time in this case.
Ooh, whoa, you look at it. I heard that bus coming.
I'm saying to put 2 electronic boards up.
Well,
you're
you're
right.
right.
Basically,
I don't know
TVs.
what's wrong with the old ones,
Yeah,
to be
they're
honest.
Yeah.
Flat screen.
Yeah.
One doesn't work.
You can't
right?
see it.
Well, can you fix that? Probably.
But I mean, you can go to
Mhm.
Costco and get 2 of these things for like $2,500.
I think we're putting the two new ones behind the board
Yeah.
members.
Yeah, it's
right?
behind the board member
So
side.
that the audience can actually see them instead of having to look side to side.
What,
And those
does Mike have bad eyes now?
Yeah.
Does hurt my neck.
No, Mike, our audience.
Oh.
He's the only guy we have. I mean, I don't know the need for all these boards, to be honest. I think it's exciting.
Well, I think you gotta have at least one, just
Well, the
because every
sideboards-
once in a
the
while.
sideboards we have.
Yeah,
work.
but those things are like from the 70s. Man.
They're a projector.
Oh, yeah, they're from the
You
70s.
can't read it.
Like a flip phone, you can't talk on that anymore.
No.
It's just not smart.
I have a drawer full of those. We gotta do something with it.
All right.
You gotta have at least one. I was at the city council meeting recently, and they only have one board. They have one there, and they have one that's on the podium that the council members can see, because they don't have the individual screens like we have. So I don't know if we necessarily need 2 if we did, but then again, the way it's designed in our boardroom, we might be, we don't really have that one area where it kind of faces out perfectly.
Focal point.
Yeah.
Right in the
Word.
middle you do. If you use the president's chair at the middle, there's
Right.
one. for
Yeah, but the
time.
podium blocks that, doesn't it?
What?
The speaker podium doesn't that block that?
Partial.
No,
Depending
no,
on
that's
what
not, you have it up.
Oh, I see what you're
The
saying.
screen up
Above
behind.
the yeah.
Well,
Okay, I got
will
you. I
screen
got
up
you. I
behind
got
you,
you.
don't
But
need
then we
one
have
outside.
But then we have that brown VWD thing.
I mean, can we value engineer that and just put
Or
one
what
up?
is that thing?
I do know one part of that discussion, and this is from the original design when we were thinking about doing both jobs. The Vance is our consultant. He was saying that because of the room in the viewing aspect, for them to see a screen big enough for one screen in there, you'd have to make it pretty darn big where it would take up a lot of that space. But if everybody, it's not like the room's crowded, but if you're doing a presentation like for Water Academy or something like that, people are that's what they're thinking about. They're thinking
Someday
about,
we're going to have a controversial issue that's going to come up, and you're going to have people come.
yeah. But they're thinking about if you
Rent it,
fill
like
the
you rent a
room.
dump truck when you need it.
So basically, one of the things he said, if you fill the room, you want people to be able to, from the back of the room to be able to see and hear what's going on, and you don't have enough wall space
Yeah.
to put a screen big enough, along that lines. So, and that's one of the reasons they have the
I understand your
sidewalks.
concept, I guess, and I'm getting your concept from Seward. You have to make it large enough for when that event happens and it doesn't back up. And that you're going through the entire facility that way. It has to be large enough for that one time, because not everybody will hear everything exactly.
As Chris would say.
But my
the
understanding
Super Bowl
is the
flush.
screens are a lot cheaper than the sewer line, though. Is what
Yeah.
my understanding is.
Those things are almost
And it's not
nothing
his
now.
concept, it's audio visual.
Yeah, I
No,
don't-
no, I'm just saying, I get,
No,
I
yeah.
get your concept, you wanna make it big enough for that one time you need it, but
I don't think the screens are probably a significant piece of the 295.
They're not.
I'm not sure what
Well,
is.
what is?
but-
for $295,000.
Well, we can get
Engineers.
yeah.
Well, when it comes in front of the board, you'll get a presentation about what the
Yeah.
project includes.
And when we take it to the engineering committee tomorrow, if we'll bring the estimate. I don't know what Vance provided, but if we have an estimate, we'll share it with the committee, and then they'll be in the minutes.
And
So this is going to engineering tomorrow?
Tomorrow,
What time's that meeting?
1:30.
Is it 1:30?
No, we gotta do a committee meeting, but I think I
Oh
will.
man, why do they meet when people can't come?
I know. They have a lot more people than that 7 o'clock.
You and I for one. I'm assuming that when you're doing an RFP and you have these bidders coming in, right? They don't know what, unless they listen to this meeting, they don't know what the budget number is.
They
Right?
know
Is
what
one of
they know what the estimate is. In this case, it's not an architect or engineer's estimate, but the consultant's estimate is. So
Oh, for the locker room?
no, for any job,
Any
any job.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't just put together some sort of scope of work, bring it, send that out to the bidders, maybe walk them around the area, and then just say, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. quote it for us.
That's exactly what we're doing, but it's a public bidding process. We're confined. So we have the California State Public Bidding, the code basically that we have to follow. We have our own rules and regulations, and we're prevailing wage. So we have to advertise correctly. We have to allow a certain amount of time. We're really confined by the public process. So in essence, that's what we're doing. We're basically putting together a scope of work, but with it, because it's the public process, there's a lot more documentation and a lot more steps that we have to go through. And then we walk them through, and we can make it a closed bid, an open bid, which means you have to be there to bid. And that's about, and after that, our flexibility starts going away completely. And then what's happened is we send out 3 addendums, mainly just clarifications on items. They want to know serial numbers, so on and so forth, that we didn't know we had to provide, of existing equipment that they're going to have to interface with. And then,
But wouldn't you, so I guess, you know, wouldn't you, but what if, they're obviously, like you said, this is not your expertise, right? Certainly not
Yeah.
mine and anybody else's, but it should be the expertise of the people that are bidding on it. What if they have a more efficient solution that can still meet our needs but could save us $100,000? I don't know, I'm just.
So we hired a consultant, and I forgot his last name. His first name's Vance. I've met him a few times. He's actually a consultant that other agencies have used to come up with audiovisual systems that are hopefully expandable and has an, according to him, an open architecture that you can add more to it as technology changes.
Mhm.
So we kind of follow that same model with both designs, and so this way we're not putting in, you know, what we're afraid of is, you know, if you bid something out and a contractor does like the conference rooms and the EOCs, and then 2 years later we bid something out to the boardroom and it's not compatible. You know, so we wanted to have some consistency, and nobody in staff really, that's not what we do for a living, so we really went out with an RFP to get a consultant to help us with those decisions. So he put together the technical specs and basically the scope of work for the contractors to bid, or the implementers to bid.
What you're talking about is almost like a design build, just put it out there and say, hey, here's generally what we want to do, you tell us how to design it and build it and how much it costs.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, those types of things monitored. I mean, the technology. There's so many different options out there, solutions out there, and there's new stuff coming. Sometimes, you know, you just get you can get some new ideas, and you know, again, I understand it needs to be compatible with what we have, but you know, there's different components to these types of systems that can be compatible. And again, if I'm just afraid that, and it's not that big of a deal, but I'm just afraid that if our consultant says, you know, this is what we're looking for, and we're anticipating it to be, you know, $395,000. Well, the people bidding on it are going to make it $395,000 for sure.
It usually, I mean, it can, absolutely, but in a competitive environment, you're hoping they compete, but the prevailing wage just brings it way up anyway, because you're not paying, you know, $25, $35 an hour for an electrician, you're paying $100 and something for an electrician to wire it up. But the big thing for us is, you know, we'd have to still get a consultant to help us make a decision, because if a contractor came in and said, hey, this is the way you should do it, this is the best product, I can get you this as a deal, I have no idea if that is a good deal or a bad deal. Is he selling me up the river or down the river? I have, you know.
Is there going to be wires hanging from the ceiling?
Yeah, or is it going to be
It's a building on
obsolete,
fire.
or is it a company that's completely going out of business? So
I got it.
at the end of the day, we still have a consultant to, you know, to kind of work us through that process.
I got you.
All right, Wes, get us back on track here.
Okay, so our next meeting will be April 25th. At that meeting, we will review the finalized capital budget and the draft proposed budget, so I'll have a budget put together for you at that meeting. We'll discuss any requested items. And then in May, we're going to we'll be reviewing the first draft and making any revisions or suggestions that you may have. May 21st, we'll have the full board workshop to review the proposed budget, and then May 30th, we will hopefully approve the recommended budget. That is the budget schedule. Any questions on that? And there's actually, it says see April 25th. I do have one more item to discuss quickly, but that's the budget party page at the end there.
Feel better.
Have to find some balloons next time.
I'm happier now.
So we've talked about the auditors and we went out for an RFP.
Yeah.
Just to give you an update / recommendation and get your input on this. So we went out for RFP. We actually got seven proposals. We did a full review of those proposals and rated them all. And you don't want to see the rating sheet we had; it's pages and pages long. So Debbie and I went through and rated them all, and then we actually picked the top three. And
Who did the interviews?
myself and Debbie Johnson, the accountant.
Okay.
And actually, in the second interview, we had Fabi in there too to give her some experience in doing that. So I think she enjoyed it.
Had who in there?
Fabi, our accounting technician.
Oh, okay.
So we actually just interviewed the top two because we figured if the top two didn't work out, we'd call in the third because they were coming from Riverside just to save them the trip. So we interviewed Davis Farr and Tiemann Ramirez and Smith, and they both had excellent interviews, and we did a rating on that as well, and we actually agreed unanimously that Davis Farr was the best selection. So in addition to them rating well, interviewing well, they also have the cheapest cost, fortunately. And over the next 3 years, if you look at our current contract versus the recommended contract or their proposed contract, we would save $12,200 or about $4,000 a year.
How did you rate the cost factor?
So
And
the
is
cost
that what
factor.
made them pop to the top because they were
Nope.
cheaper?
No, so they were at the top anyway. But so the last thing that I did was pop in a cost rating, and it's basically just 1 through 7, whoever is the cheapest. And I think
So
it's
even if you took the cost rating aside,
Yep.
Davis Farr technically was the best.
So they rated the highest anyway. I just actually took that out, and they would have been 18.5 versus 16.5 for the next two. So they were the top, and staff is actually recommending that the finance committee recommend them for the board approval on April 18th.
And how many people from Davis Farr did you meet with?
Two. We met the partner, Jennifer Farr, and Shannon was the manager that will be here. And you can see Davis Farr actually has 30 partner hours proposed. Our current firm only has 15, so I thought that was interesting, or beneficial as well. Now we're
Rogers
here.
Anderson?
Yep. So they're number 4 on the list there with 15.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, which is interesting because when when we went through that process with them, one of the things they talked about how the first year is always a little bit more expensive because they're getting to know us and everything. But then after that, the years after, now that this would be technically year 4 for them, right? You would have expected them to be a little bit less than everybody else. So after already being around for 3 years.
We were too easy on them, obviously.
I was actually surprised that the bids came in, and not only they come. Sometimes you get like buying bids where firms come in and they say, okay, here's $6,000 lower than everybody else. But this was actually more consistent. You had a lot of firms that were around 24,000.
Maybe we were actually too hard on them, and they're like, "Hey, it's the only way we're going to go back there is if we really get
Get
paid."
paid.
Traffic to deal with.
That guy Hal, man, I don't want to deal with that guy.
Yeah, that traffic.
I think
I
that
would go with your
look, I mean,
recommendation.
for
I mean, your
this kind of
recommendation.
service, I think that obviously we didn't see any, we didn't see the proposals or meet the teams or anything, but it looks like you guys went through a good process, and I'm certainly always open and happy to save money. So
So if that's your choice, we'll recommend that the full board agree and go with your choice.
Sounds great.
Would you be okay if when staff prepares the staff report that we indicate that the
Sure.
finance committee supports the,
Yeah.
okay,
Most
thank you.
definitely, most
I'll
definitely.
endorse that message.
And then, see, it's his choice. If they won't do the job, we know whose fault it is. I like being able to pin things, in case you never ever noticed
This is
that.
Wes, this is
Notice
Wes's,
that.
this is
I know.
Wes's first big hire right here.
Learn something new every day.
And to give you a little bit more information, some of their clients include the Water Authority, Leucadia Wastewater District, Rancho California Water District, Irvine Ranch Water District, Sweetwater Authority, Vista. They've got a ton of other
No,
water
it's good
districts.
enough.
actually.
We should
And we're gonna have the
accept
same number of meetings with them as we did the previous, and that's all
Maybe
set
even
up.
more the first year because they got to get to know us. First year's always more detailed. They go through.
It's a
just-
lesson to learn.
Yeah.
Cool. Good job saving money.
Great, good job, thank you very much for doing that.
That's all we had, right?
All we have for today. We'll go back to the budget part.
Then with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.